Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Namaste from India. So basically, hearty congratulations to Dr. O.P. Sharma and team. Excellent initiative in actually enhancing knowledge on geriatric medicine, specialized in various topics, and sharing knowledge amongst each other. It's really a great initiative. We're all very proud of you. So there are actually ENT is a very broad specialty. There are more than 1,000 disorders. But why do we have to discuss about geriatrics and otolaryngology? Because we have this population amongst us which really needs special care. In fact, we are all also growing old. So all these problems that I would be discussing may be of interest even for you, because I think all of us should be aware of common ENT problems that are managed in day-to-day life. So I would, most of them have good illustrations, and I made it as simple as possible. I hope all of you will be able to understand and enjoy the lecture. So at least 1/3 of the population that comes to us on the outpatient is geriatric population. And as I said, they need special care. Sometimes it's a challenge, even to us, extra patience is required, even in history taking and even while clinical examination, because asking them to open their mouth and because of, easy gag reflex, they may not show you properly, but a lot of patience is required in handling such patients in order to do a very good examination of the pharynx and the larynx, especially. It is, as I said, it's very challenging. You have to be making repeated examinations, but not to miss on any diagnosis, because this is an age group where there could be a lesion somewhere hidden and you might miss it if you don't do a good clinical examination. So I emphasize on good clinical examination. Amongst all the ENT problems, otological problems has been the most common, especially hearing loss. Hearing loss has been the most common presentation amongst this population. So we have elective cases that come to the OPD, and there are emergency cases that go to the triage. So I'll be discussing in my future course different kinds of ENT problems. So some of the common ENT problems, first we're starting with ear problems. So ear related are acute otitis media, chronic otitis media, otitis externa. Now, when I say media, it is basically middle ear infections. So otitis externa is basically external ear infection. As you know, ear is divided into 3 parts: external, middle, and inner. Otomycosis, again, is an external ear infection. Basically, it's a fungal infection. I'll be showing you some pictures also for you to easily understand. Malignant otitis externa, actually it's a misnomer, but it is a type of ear infection, which I'll be discussing about. Presbyacusis, sorry, the spelling is a bit, there's a spelling mistake here. It is presbyacusis, A-C-U-S-I-S, and it's all in continuity, a single word. This is age-induced hearing loss. Then sudden hearing loss syndrome, where this can occur in any age group, but it's also seen in geriatric population. And tinnitus and vertigo, very commonly seen in this age group. So now coming to otitis externa, that is infections of the external ear. Now, if you see, that's the ear canal in the picture. You can see a swelling there. The ear canal is obviously not patent. You're not seeing through and through canal. There is a swelling. Now, this is a sign of external ear infection. From outside, there's a simple sign. There is a small structure called tragus. If you just press on it, it's tender in external infection. So this tenderness is a good sign. I mean, it's easy to elicit. And apart from this, now you can find sometimes a scanty discharge inside. I'm highlighting a few points so that it's, whereas other salient features are mentioned in each slide. So instead of discussing about the causes like the name of the bacteria, etc., I would like to emphasize more on the clinical diagnosis. So as I said, externally elicit this tenderness, then you see the swelling, you see narrowing of the canal. You may not see the ear and jaw because of the swelling. And then apart from that, history will obviously be there. In younger population, more so it is because of swimming, etc. So it's called swimmers here. But the elderly population, it's mostly because they use either safety pins or fingernails or any kind of object they introduce inside the ear, like even hairpins, and that can cause this kind of a ear infection. A simple thing, even introducing fingernails is enough to cause this kind of infection. So basically, this can be managed in the outpatient. Apart from the pain management, you need to do an external bacteriostatic dressing, like we use either Neosporin ointment. Sometimes you need a combination of steroid, or it is sometimes, if it depends on the type of infection. If you clinically it is like a bacterial infection, just a bacteriostatic ointment is sufficient. But if you think it's a mixed infection, then you use an ointment which has everything, steroid and antibacterial and antifungal properties also. And apart from that, you give a course of antibiotics, and usually the infections are treated within a week. It's extremely painful condition, so one must present quickly. So we always educate the patients about this. Especially people are in the habit of continuously itching their ears, so that is to be avoided. Otomycosis is a fungal infection of the external ear. So you can see some moist appearance in the canal, and you can see some spores-like thing. If you see white spores, it's usually candidiasis. If you see black spores, it can be some other like aspergillosis and other fungal infections. Usually a culture is taken and a good suction clearance is required. And after you clear up everything, then you see there can be some kind of congestion beyond that, but not necessarily. Sometimes there's a moist discharge along with the spores. Whatever it is, a good suction clearance is required, and then you give antifungal ear drops, and then systemic antifungals are usually not required. Now, malignant otitis externa, this is seen in immunocompromised people. Now, the term malignant is used, as I said previously, it's a misnomer, only because it behaves like malignancy. It keeps progressing. In few days, the entire canal can be destroyed. It can even spread to the middle ear, and it can even spread to the brain. It can involve the nerves like facial nerve. So it's basically a progressing condition, and behaves like malignancy. As I said, the bones can get destroyed. So how do we diagnose this? First, the history itself, it's very obvious. If a patient is coming with external otitis infection, like external ear infection, but underlying if there is a diabetic condition, or if the patient is on prolonged steroids, or immunocompromised because of malignancy or any other reason, you have to suspect malignant otitis externa. In small clinics, usually, this kind of thing, this diagnosis is missed. More often it's missed. So these patients are suffering for weeks together, and then they come to tertiary care centers like Apollo Hospital, and within a few minutes, we make the right diagnosis. And then, of course, they are asked for certain investigations like either gallium scan or any other contrast CT, where it will show you the extent of the disease. Some of them need even surgical removal of the disease, because you have to go and remove the necrosed bone. And then we put them on good IV antibiotics for at least 4 to 6 weeks, apart from oral toileting. That means everyday suction clearance and ointment packs, etc. required. So very good, thorough cleaning and putting them on broad spectrum antibiotics covering Pseudomonas is very important to avoid complications. Otitis media with effusion. Effusion is basically fluid. Now, fluid is in the middle ear. Now, how does it happen? In children, it's a different reason, because of recurrent colds and coughs. Otitis media with effusion in elderly is because there is some kind of lesion or something obstructing the eustachian tube. So one side otitis media with effusion is very, very important to be diagnosed. A lot of people, again, miss this condition in elderly. If you just treat it as a regular otitis media with effusion, which means you just give them oral steroids and antibiotics, etc., it's not going to help. If you do not examine the nasopharynx and not look at what is in the mind, only then you will examine. So it's all, you would look for what is in your mind. So you will always have to rule out malignancy in such cases in elderly. So that is why nasopharynx examination is very important. Sometimes a proof puncture is required, and sometimes a grommet insertion is required. Otitis media with effusion can also happen post radiotherapy. You're treating, for some head and neck cancer, you give it radiation, and then the Eustachian tube dysfunction happens, and then also this condition occurs. Now, acute otitis media, this is a very common condition and it can occur in any age group. This is a simple bacterial infection and where the entire eardrum is completely congested and diffusely congested, and it's also edematous. Now, acute otitis media is due to a regular bacterial infection like either Haemophilus influenza or it can be Pseudomonas or any other infection, but this is usually following common colds, and you can treat it with broad spectrum antibiotics, and they do very well in a week. Chronic otitis media, now this is an infection that's going on for years now, or sometimes even just for a few months, but whatever that is existing beyond a month, usually we consider them as chronic. And chronic otitis media usually presents with a perforation in the eardrum. See, in acute otitis media, even if there is a perforation, it heals within few days. Whereas if the perforation doesn't heal and it remains, then there is recurrent discharge from the perforation. And why does it happen? Either it is because of recurrent common cold or because of water entering the ear. Again, oral toileting is very important. So under microscope, we do good suction clearance. And then after good suction clearance, then you give them antibiotic ear drops, then follow them up after a week or so. And just 1 or 2 follow-ups, most of them do very well. If it's a small perforation, usually it takes about 4 to 6 weeks. It can even heal up. There are a lot of people who hurry up and say that these cases need surgery, but you'll be surprised. A lot of patients do very well with conservative treatment. In elderly, it's a challenge, especially in diabetics. Now, these are the patients where it doesn't heal. And even a surgical option is not a great option for such people, only because in a certain age, which means after 65, as we're talking about in geriatric population, healing of grafts is not very good. Normally in young patients, we get it's a 90% to 100% result when we do a myrinoplasty or a tympanoplasty, which means repairing the eardrums. But if a patient presents at 80 years of age, and then he has a perforation, we ask them to just leave it and advise few precautions like asking them to keep the ear dry, not to allow water entering the ear, and also prevention of colds by giving them some nasal sprays, etc. And most of them, some of them we even do cautery patching, which is a simple procedure done in the outpatient, but usually we defer surgery in such cases. So in all these cases, otoscopy is very important as we have so many advanced methods of clinical examination. Earlier, it used to be just, bullseye lamp, which used to be very primitive. Now we have good endoscopes. We have 0 degree, 45 degree, 70 degree endoscopes, and then we can see them at various angles. And then apart from that, we also have good microscopes in our centers. And in fact, they can even be recorded and we can give them printouts. We even explain them, showing them on the camera, and people are able to understand their own ailments. So in this also, you can see that there is a eardrum and there is a healing perforation. And so apart from otoscopy, we need to assess their hearing. So we have a proper audiometry setup. And we do pure tone audiometry, which is done in various frequencies. We assess the hearing thresholds and then treat accordingly. If there is a mixed hearing loss or a sensorineural hearing loss, we advise them hearing aids. And as I said, depending upon case to case, then we give them antibiotics or antifungals, etc. Now, sudden sensorineural loss, it is actually loss of more than 30 decibels hearing loss. And this happens very acutely within 2 days or 3 days. This can occur in any age group, but it happens even in elderly population. So it's very important for them to present early to the otolaryngologist, because initially, if they present within 3 or 4 days or within a week, intratympanic steroids do wonders. Again, in small centers and most centers, people only give oral steroids, but intratympanic steroids in the form of steroid injection using an insulin syringe to a small patient gives excellent results. It entirely reverses back to normal. But if they're present beyond a week or 10 days, then the chances of even intratympanic steroids working becomes much less. So we do not even offer these injections beyond 2 weeks. Sometimes we also ask them to go for hyperbaric therapy, but since they are doing of intratympanic injections, we even avoid that. So again, a simple diagnosis, audiogram is sufficient, and then we do a follow-up audiogram after giving these injections. Usually 3 to 4 injections are sufficient. And the other condition is presbyacusis, like this is of course seen in this population, and a lot of patients come every day. At least there's one patient presenting with this kind of hearing loss, and usually the history is chronic, which means the onset was insidious, and the duration has been for more than 1 or 2 years. And it's usually the attendants who come and tell that they are suffering from this hearing disability. And usually they do very well with hearing aids. We have digital hearing aids, and with advanced special features where background noise is minimal, and acceptance has become much more. I mean, it's earlier acceptance wasn't so good, only because the elderly would never like background. In fact, nobody would like it, but for them, background noise, like listening to the traffic noise, etc., used to be causing a lot of irritation, and so they would throw away the hearing aids. But now more and more acceptance has been seen in this population. So we have done with otological problems. Now coming to the nose problem, like there can be a deviated nasal septum, which has been existing for a long time, for many years now. Usually the correction is not required because they have been having it for many years. But if they have been having excessive crusting, or if there is very loud snoring and that's leading to sleep apnea, and also if it's causing recurrent nose bleeding or any other special reason for which you're forced to treat them, then surgically, then you have to correct them under local anesthesia. But under local anesthesia, it usually takes about 25 to 30 minutes, and they do very well. But if they're asymptomatic, we'll have to leave it alone. And even if they have mild symptoms, then you treat them, etc. And epistaxis, yes, this is the most common emergency in elderly population. It can have various reasons, but in epistaxis, every patient has to be examined very well. In elderly especially, nasal endoscopy is very important after the bleeding has settled. Initially, of course, the bleeding has to be controlled. Depending upon the major you do with, there are various methods of treating epistaxis. In the outpatient, we usually do cautery, chemical or electrical cautery, and treat them. Again, making them, calm is very important, counseling them, and also giving a little sedation in case they're admitted. That helps. And of course, not to miss tumors, etc. So depending upon the type of patient, we order investigations. Now, there are other conditions like allergic rhinitis, chronic rhinosinusitis, benign tumors, malignant tumors, even foreign bodies in the nose. So there are many other nasal problems. So deviated nasal septum, sorry. So instead of going into the etiology, etc., sorry for the slide skipping. Go to the next one. Yeah. Deviated nasal septum. Deviated nasal septum is either the trauma which happened several years ago. So it can be unilateral or bilateral, or it can be causing just snoring or snoring with sleep apnea. So allergic rhinitis is a very common, sorry, why is that skipping? So allergic rhinitis is very common in this population, and especially with Delhi winters. And here we see a lot of cases in the OPD. Most of them come with sneezing and watering, and sometimes, hyposmia because of presentation with nasal polyps. So it depends on how long they had been suffering from allergic rhinitis. Now, polyposis will cause hyposmia, but anosmia is another thing elderly population usually complains of, and most of the times we're unable to help them treating this condition. So otherwise, all the cases of allergic rhinitis, they do very well with intranasal steroids. So they come in the form of nasal sprays, and then they do very well usually we give them for 4 to 8 weeks, and then follow up. Sometimes they need, blood tests like IgE. Rhinosinusitis, it depends whether it is acute rhinosinusitis or chronic rhinosinusitis. And there are various reasons for it. Now, the most common presentation is either nasal stuffiness along with headache and facial pain, sometimes postnasal drip. Postnasal drip is a more common presentation in elderly population. Why? Because the mucus has become already so viscous, and because of which they constantly feel that in the throat, and they're more irritable because of that. And loss of smell again. Now, most of them do very well with conservative treatment. And if it's chronic, then we have to subject them to CT imaging. And normally a plain scan is sufficient unless you're suspecting malignancy. In that case, then we have to do a contrast scan.
Dr. Kalpana, madam.
Tumors, these can be.
Dr. Kalpana, madam, you have 4 minutes more. Madam.
Okay, I only have 4 minutes?
Yes, madam.
Okay, I'll keep skipping them. Pyogenic granulomas, squamous papillomas, and inverted papillomas, and malignant tumors, these are not to be missed. And usually a CT and MRI is sufficient, and depending upon the extent, we plan the surgery. Now, these throat cancers are, of course, not to be missed in elderly. They can be affecting any part of the throat, like cheek or tongue or tonsil, larynx or laryngopharynx or thyroid. Now, these are the common laryngeal problems. These are benign problems. You can see on the screen, one is that nodule that is shown on the vocal cord sitting there. Then leukoplakia, you can see the white patch. Now, the one in the bottom is chronic laryngitis. You can see the thickening of the vocal cords. In acute laryngitis, you can see the cords which are edematous. It's a nice picture. And vocal nodules, you can see them symmetrically seen on both the sides. They do very well with laser therapy. Now, these are some of the benign conditions. All these pictures have been taken in the outpatient. So you can see them as geographic tongue, or you can see a submucous fibrosis with a severe trismus, or you can see fungating growth here, or you can see the black hairy cell leukoplakia. And these are some of the conditions that are seen inside the oropharynx. You can see fungal infections of the tonsils or base of tongue. Now, foreign bodies in the elderly are also very common. They can be either inhaled foreign bodies or ingested foreign bodies. Now, you can see this in the esophagus, a small, thin needle-like, which is seen on the X-ray here. Neck conditions can be either submandibular swelling or a thyroid swelling, as seen in these pictures, again, depending upon the need. If the history has been long, the first thing is ultrasound required for seeing the extent, and then FNAC, and then depending upon the FNAC results, we treat them. And these are the other things that are usually presenting with the elderly population, usually complaints of dry mouth and itchy ears and foreign body sensation and otalgia because of the joint dysfunction. Sometimes stylalgia, dysphagia is a very challenging thing. Most of them have swallowing disorders, and sometimes even I send them to Dr. Seema Grover for swallowing therapy. There can be maggots inside the nose, because of poor hygiene. And there can be dacryocystitis, cystitis. The lacrimal duct is blocked because of some reason, and so they develop the swelling below the eye. Anosmia, I've already mentioned. Atrophic rhinitis, because of degenerating turbinates, etc. inside, they develop a lot of crusting. This is very, very important. Sleep apnea in elderly, this is not to be missed. We even emphasize during the preventive health checks, even seeing the throat, if there is some edema in the palate, we never miss this finding, and then we
go for sleep study and tell them the importance, especially if they have comorbidities, they have to go for polysomnography and further treatment. Now, now how has ENT advanced? You know, there are a lot of treatment methods that have changed from before. Even in the outpatient, we have advanced setup, and even in the operation theaters, we have lasers and we have coablation, we have endoscopes. We are in the era of robotics, so a lot of robotic surgeries can be done in the elderly because of the advantages of minimal blood loss and short stay and scarless procedures, and some of the lesions like hemangiomas, they don't even need blood transfusions. Some of the cancers in the base of tongue, they don't need a mandibular cut. So these are the type of advances in robotic surgery, and we are very happily offering these people with minimal pain and morbidity. Thank you. Thank you for the patient listening.